The night was alive with the chatter of a high-profile event at the largest mansion in the neighborhood. Luxury cars lined the driveway, and the glow of elegant chandeliers spilled through the tall windows. Inside, the millionaire and his family played hosts to city elites, offering them champagne and an evening of sophistication. The air outside was crisp and quiet, a stark contrast to the bustling interior. Amid this tranquility, a teenage girl named Aisha walked along the dimly lit road after running a late-night errand for her grandmother. The neighborhood she lived in wasn't far from the mansion, but it might as well have been worlds apart. Despite the challenges of her life, Aisha was known for her courage and quick thinking, traits that were about to be tested in ways she never imagined. Just as Aisha passed the mansion, she noticed smoke rising ominously against the starry sky. In moments, the scene transformed into chaos. Flames erupted from the roof, painting the night with an eerie orange glow. People in expensive suits and gowns stumbled out of the mansion, coughing and shouting. Sirens wailed in the distance, but help hadn't arrived yet. Aisha froze for a moment, taking in the confusion. Then she heard it, a piercing cry for help coming from inside. Her heart raced as she tried to assess the situation. Most of the guests had made it out, but through the smoke-filled windows, she spotted the shadow of a young child on the second floor. Near the doorway, a woman's panicked voice called out a name, followed by a fit of coughing. It was the millionaire's wife, struggling to find her way down the grand staircase engulfed in smoke. Onlookers stood frozen in fear, some recording the scene with their phones, but none daring to approach the inferno. Aisha clenched her fists, feeling the weight of the decision before her. There was no time to wait for the fire department. She dropped her bag and ran toward the mansion. Smoke filled her lungs as she crossed the threshold, but she kept moving. The woman near the staircase collapsed into Aisha's arms, barely conscious. Aisha guided her toward the door, ensuring she was safely outside before turning back toward the cries of the child. Onlookers gasped as Aisha disappeared into the thickening smoke. Inside, the heat was unbearable, and the air was thick with ash. Aisha pushed forward, her eyes stinging, until she found the child huddled in a corner of an upstairs bedroom. Flames licked the edges of the room, threatening to trap them both. "It's okay," Aisha whispered, her voice steady despite her fear. She wrapped the child in her jacket and carried him out, navigating the collapsing hallways with remarkable composure. As she emerged from the burning mansion, clutching the child in her arms, the crowd erupted in applause and disbelief. Paramedics rushed to the scene, attending to the woman and her child. The millionaire, having been outside coordinating rescue efforts, turned to see Aisha. For a moment, he was speechless, taking in the sight of the soot-covered girl who had risked her life to save his family. Aisha, gasping for air but refusing medical attention, handed the boy to his mother. "He's okay now," she said softly before stepping back, reluctant to linger in the spotlight. Little did she know, her life was about to change forever. Aisha was the kind of teen who stood out, not for her clothes or gadgets, but for her quiet strength and unshakable determination. Growing up in a tough neighborhood, where opportunities were rare and challenges were plenty, she had learned early on how to adapt and persevere. Raised by her grandmother after her parents passed away, Aisha developed a sense of responsibility that far exceeded her years. Whether it was juggling schoolwork, running errands, or helping neighbors in need, she always found a way to make herself useful. Despite the hardships, Aisha dreamed big. She wanted to become a firefighter or a paramedic someday, driven by a strong sense of duty to help others. The local fire station had been her favorite place since childhood. She often watched firefighters train, captivated by their bravery and the way they worked as a team. With no money for extracurriculars, Aisha made the most of free workshops and online resources to learn basic first aid and survival skills. Her resourcefulness and quick thinking earned her respect in her community, but she remained humble, never seeking attention for her good deeds. On the other side of town, the mansion stood as a symbol of wealth and privilege. The family who owned it, the Dawsons, were no strangers to luxury. The husband, Richard Dawson, was a successful businessman, known for his thriving real estate empire. His wife, Eleanor, often hosted elaborate events, and their young son, Henry, was doted on by nannies and tutors. While their lives seemed picture-perfect from the outside, the Dawsons lived in a bubble, far removed from the struggles of people like Aisha. The night of the fire, the Dawsons were hosting a grand party, complete with catered delicacies, live music, and a guest list that included some of the city's most influential figures. Richard was busy networking with potential investors, while Eleanor entertained their guests with practiced grace. Henry, restless and curious, had wandered upstairs to play in his room, away from the noise and unfamiliar faces. When the fire broke out, chaos descended in an instant. It started in the kitchen, quickly spreading through the ground floor, cutting off access to the main staircase. Smoke filled the air as guests fled to safety, leaving behind their drinks and hors d'oeuvres. In the panic, Eleanor realized Henry was still upstairs, but the flames made it impossible to reach him. Her cries for help were drowned out by the commotion, and her own attempts to navigate the smoke left her coughing and disoriented near the staircase. As the guests evacuated, many whispered about how fortunate it was to escape unscathed, but few thought to turn back. It was in this critical moment that Aisha, passing by the scene, became their unexpected savior. The Dawsons' wealth and influence had always shielded them from danger, but that night they were completely at the mercy of a selfless teenager who had nothing to gain but everything to give. The night was ablaze with chaos as flames licked the edges of the grand mansion. Smoke billowed into the sky, a signal of desperation visible for miles. Guests who had escaped the inferno stood in stunned silence, their glamorous evening now overshadowed by panic. Sirens wailed in the distance, but help felt too far away. Among the crowd was a solitary figure, a teen who had no connection to the event but found herself at its center. Aisha didn't think twice. The cries of a child carried through the smoke, cutting through the noise of confusion like a beacon. She covered her mouth with the edge of her hoodie, braced herself, and ran toward the house. Onlookers tried to stop her, shouting warnings about the danger, but she pushed forward. For Aisha, the thought of doing nothing was more unbearable than the fear of fire. Inside, the heat was oppressive, and visibility was near zero. Crouching low to avoid the thickest smoke, Aisha followed the sound of the boy's cries. The grand staircase was partially engulfed, but she spotted a small figure at the top, huddled against the railing. "I'm coming," she shouted, her voice firm and steady, despite her racing heart. She navigated the debris, ignoring the searing heat against her skin, and reached the boy. He was terrified, clutching a stuffed toy as tears streamed down his soot-streaked face. Aisha gently scooped him up, wrapping him in her arms to shield him from the heat. "Close your eyes and hold tight," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. Step by step, she descended the staircase, each move calculated to avoid falling debris. Just as she reached the base, a loud crack echoed through the hall. Part of the ceiling collapsed behind her, narrowly missing them. Outside, the crowd gasped as Aisha emerged from the smoke, the boy safe in her arms. His cries had quieted, replaced by the soft murmurs of a child who knew he was no longer alone. But just as relief began to wash over her, Aisha heard another sound, a woman's faint, desperate cry for help. It was the boy's mother, trapped on the second floor. Without hesitation, Aisha handed the boy to a nearby guest and turned back toward the house. The onlookers shouted protests, pleading with her to stay out of harm's way, but Aisha was already moving. She couldn't leave knowing someone else was inside. The second trip was even more treacherous. The smoke was thicker, the air hotter, and the flames more aggressive. Aisha called out, "Where are you?" Her voice was met by a weak reply from a corner of the room. She found the woman crouched behind an overturned piece of furniture, coughing uncontrollably and struggling to stand. "I've got you," Aisha said, helping her up and guiding her toward the staircase. Together, they navigated the fiery maze. Aisha kept the woman close, shielding her face from falling embers. As they reached the staircase, it groaned under their weight, threatening to give way. Aisha moved quickly, helping the woman down step by step until they finally burst through the front door. Cheers erupted from the crowd as Aisha and the woman emerged, coughing but alive. The boy, now reunited with his mother, clung to her, sobbing with relief. The woman knelt to Aisha's level, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us," she whispered, her gratitude pouring out with every word. She wrapped Aisha in a hug, holding her tightly as if trying to convey the depth of her thanks. The spectacle was overwhelming. Phones recorded the moment and whispers of admiration spread among the guests. It wasn't just the act of bravery that struck them. It was the selflessness of a girl who had risked everything for strangers. When the father arrived, moments later, having rushed from his business meeting upon hearing the news, he froze at the sight of his soot-covered wife and son. His gaze shifted to Aisha, who stood quietly to the side, brushing ash from her hoodie. The magnitude of what had just happened hit him like a wave. Here was a girl, barely more than a child herself, who had done what even the most seasoned adults might hesitate to do. Stepping forward, he extended his hand. "You saved my family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Aisha shook his hand, a faint smile on her lips. "I just did what I had to," she replied simply. For her, it wasn't about recognition. It was about doing the right thing, no matter the risk. The aftermath of the fire left a surreal calm in its wake. As paramedics tended to the family, Aisha quietly slipped away, her job done. She had no intention of staying for recognition or reward. For her, it wasn't about accolades. It was simply about doing what was right. She walked home through the same streets she had taken countless times before, the weight of the night's events starting to settle on her shoulders. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, the mother couldn't stop talking about the teen who had saved her and her son. Her voice trembled with gratitude as she recounted the bravery of the young girl who had risked everything to save their lives. "We need to find her," she told her husband, her determination unshaken. "We need to thank her properly." The millionaire, a man accustomed to solving problems with money and influence, felt an unfamiliar tug of humility. He called for his security team to track down the mysterious hero. Within hours, they found Aisha's modest home, a small apartment tucked in a corner of the city that spoke volumes about her circumstances. When they arrived, the family's astonishment deepened. They saw a girl far younger than they had imagined, surrounded by the simple trappings of a family that had little but worked hard for what they had. Aisha greeted them with quiet politeness, her mother standing protectively at her side. "You didn't have to come," Aisha said, her voice steady but shy. "I just did what anyone would do." But the mother shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "Not everyone would have done what you did. You risked your life for us. That's more than bravery, it's kindness, and we can't ignore that." The millionaire stood silent for a moment, taking in the surroundings and Aisha's unwavering humility. He saw in her something rare, a selflessness and courage that put his own world of material wealth to shame. He thought about his business associates, the people who surrounded him daily, and the shallow priorities that often consumed their lives. The contrast with Aisha's actions struck him deeply. As the conversation continued, the family learned about Aisha's dreams of becoming a firefighter or paramedic. She spoke of her admiration for first responders and her desire to help others, even as her own family struggled to make ends meet. Her words were simple, but they carried an earnestness that moved the millionaire and his wife in a way they hadn't expected. The wife, who had always taken her privilege for granted, found herself reflecting on the fragility of life. "We could have lost everything tonight," she said quietly to her husband later. "And it was someone who had so little who gave us everything back." The millionaire, often focused on expanding his wealth and influence, realized how narrow his priorities had been. In Aisha, he saw a reminder of the importance of compassion and the strength of character that no amount of money could buy. He resolved to show his gratitude not with fleeting gestures, but with something meaningful, something that could change Aisha's life as profoundly as she had changed theirs. The following morning, a sleek black car pulled up outside Aisha's modest apartment. Neighbors peeked out of their windows, curious about the unusual sight in the quiet neighborhood. The millionaire and his family stepped out, carrying an air of determination. They were there to honor the young girl who had risked everything for their family. Aisha answered the knock on the door with a mix of surprise and apprehension. Her mother stood behind her, unsure of what to expect. The millionaire introduced himself with a warm smile, extending his gratitude once more. "You didn't just save our lives, you reminded us of what truly matters," he said. "We want to help you the way you helped us." The man's words were followed by a series of incredible offers. First, he presented Aisha with a fully funded education at any school or training program of her choice. He had already spoken to institutions specializing in firefighting and paramedic training, ensuring that she would have access to the resources she needed to pursue her dream. "You have the bravery and the heart," he told her. "Now you'll have the tools to match." Next, he turned to Aisha's mother and handed her a set of keys. "This is to a new home for your family," he said. "You've raised an extraordinary daughter, and you deserve a place where you can all thrive." The gesture left her mother in tears, overwhelmed by the generosity. But the gifts didn't stop there. The millionaire announced a major donation to the neighborhood, aimed at creating programs for underprivileged youth. He spoke about funding a community center that would provide mentorship, education, and recreational opportunities for kids like Aisha. "Your courage has inspired us to give back to others who have the same potential," he said. For Aisha, the most touching part of the day came when the family extended an invitation to be a part of their lives. They promised to provide her with ongoing mentorship, guidance, and support, ensuring that she never felt alone on her journey. The millionaire's wife, still emotional from the events of the previous night, hugged Aisha tightly. "You're part of our family now," she said. Though overwhelmed, Aisha accepted the offers with grace, her humility intact. She vowed to make the most of the opportunities, not just for herself, but for her community. The bond that formed that day was genuine and enduring, built on mutual respect and gratitude. For Aisha, it wasn't just about the gifts. It was about the new chapter of hope and possibility that had opened before her. The ripple effect of Aisha's bravery became evident in the weeks and months following her heroic act. The once quiet neighborhood buzzed with new energy, fueled by the story of the girl who risked everything to save lives. Her courage became a source of pride for her community, inspiring others to believe in their own ability to make a difference, no matter their circumstances. Aisha, now equipped with the resources to chase her dreams, enrolled in a renowned firefighting and paramedic training program. The opportunity was more than she ever imagined, but she took it with the same determination she had shown during the fire. Her instructors quickly recognized her potential, and she excelled in every aspect of her training. Her resilience and composure under pressure became a hallmark of her character. Meanwhile, the Millionaire family underwent their own transformation. Inspired by Aisha's courage and selflessness, they shifted their priorities toward giving back. The husband, once consumed by business deals and high-profile events, became deeply involved in philanthropic efforts. His wife spearheaded the creation of community programs, focusing on providing underprivileged youth with mentorship and educational opportunities. Their son, the child Aisha had saved, began to grow up with a new sense of gratitude and empathy, shaped by the values his parents were now embracing. The Millionaire's donation to the neighborhood resulted in a state-of-the-art community center that became a hub for learning, creativity, and empowerment. Named in Aisha's honor, the center offered free classes, workshops, and after-school programs for kids who, like her, dreamed of a brighter future. Aisha made frequent visits to the center, sharing her journey and mentoring younger children, reinforcing the idea that no act of kindness or bravery is ever too small to matter. Years later, Aisha stood tall in her firefighter uniform, the emblem of her department glinting under the sun. Behind her, a fire truck gleamed ready for its next mission. The Millionaire's family stood nearby, their pride evident as they watched the girl they once knew as a stranger, now standing as a beacon of hope and heroism. The young boy she had rescued, now older, approached her with a heartfelt smile. "You're my hero," he said, his words carrying the weight of years of gratitude. In a final act of recognition, the city held an award ceremony to honor Aisha's bravery and contributions. She was presented with a plaque, her name etched in bold letters, as a permanent reminder of the lives she had touched. As she addressed the crowd, her voice steady and warm, she spoke about the power of compassion and resilience. "We all have the ability to make a difference," she said. "Sometimes it's a single act of courage that sparks change, not just for one person, but for an entire community." The closing moment captured Aisha standing beside the plaque. Her community gathered around her, united by her story. The Millionaire and his family stood proudly by her side, their journey forever intertwined with hers. The story ended with a message that resonated beyond the ceremony. True heroes don't just save lives, they inspire change, creating a legacy that lives on in the hearts of others.